The trouble began long before anyone realized what was happening. On a quiet suburban street, where the sound of lawnmowers and birds normally filled the air, an elderly widow named Margaret Hayes sat trembling on the grass in front of the house she had lived in for more than 50 years. She wasn't sitting there to rest, she had been forced out. Her late husband's dreams, her memories, her entire life had been locked behind a door now claimed by strangers. They weren't visitors. They weren't tenants. They were squatters who had taken over her home the moment she was hospitalized after a fall. And now, after returning home weak and shaken, Margaret found herself standing outside her own front door, unwanted, unwelcome, and utterly alone. If you believe kindness and second chances can still change the world, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Margaret's eyes were red and tired, her hands shaking as she clutched a weathered handbag, the only thing the squatters allowed her to take before slamming the door behind her. Neighbors watched from a distance, some too scared to intervene, others whispering but never stepping forward. The squatters inside her home were the kind of people who made others nervous, loud, heavily tattooed, muscular, and quick to intimidate. For Margaret, they were a nightmare she never expected to face in the final years of her life. But life has a way of sending help from the most unexpected places. Across town, a biker club known as the Iron Guardians was gathering at their clubhouse for their weekly ride. They were a rough-looking bunch, heavy boots, leather vests, loud motorcycles, and arms covered in ink. People often judged them before hearing them speak. But behind the intimidating appearance was a brotherhood built on loyalty, protection, and a surprising amount of compassion. Their leader, a silver-bearded man known simply as Bear, had built the club around one rule: defend the defenseless. Bear heard about Margaret not through any official call, but from a young club member whose cousin lived near her. The message was simple: an old widow has been kicked out of her home. She's sitting alone outside. Bear stood silently for a moment, then nodded once, firmly. The Iron Guardians mounted their motorcycles, engines rumbling like thunder across the neighborhood as they rode toward Margaret Street. When they arrived, they saw her, frail, crying, sitting helplessly on the grass. The sight hit them harder than they expected. These were men who weren't intimidated by anything, but seeing a grandmother-like figure abandoned and broken did something to their hearts. Bear stepped off his bike and walked toward Margaret with slow, respectful steps. He knelt beside her, his leather vest creaking, and reached out his hand. His voice was gentler than anyone would expect from someone who looked like him. In that moment, Margaret wasn't looking at a biker, she was looking at hope. Behind them, the squatters pushed open the window blinds and stared out. Their expressions shifted from arrogance to unease as they saw the line of motorcycles and the wall of bikers standing in formation. They weren't used to being confronted, not like this, not by people who weren't afraid of them. Bear didn't storm in. He didn't shout. Instead, he listened. Margaret told him about her husband, about how this house was the last piece of him she had. She explained how she had nowhere else to go. The bikers exchanged glances, their faces tightening with anger, not the reckless kind, but the kind that comes from seeing injustice and refusing to walk away. With controlled confidence, Bear stood and approached the house. The squatters tried to look tough, but their bravado faded under the steady, unblinking stare of men who had lived through real battles. Without ever resorting to violence, the bikers made it crystal clear that Margaret was coming back inside her home, and anyone refusing to leave would be facing more trouble than they had anticipated. Intimidation wasn't necessary, their presence alone was enough. The squatters packed up quickly, muttering under their breath, but unwilling to test the Iron Guardians' patience. Once the house was cleared, the bikers didn't stop there. They helped Margaret back inside, walking her through each room, reassuring her that everything was safe. Some cleaned up the mess the squatters left behind, others repaired broken locks and replaced damaged furniture. They opened windows to let fresh air in, scrubbed the kitchen counters, and even mowed her lawn without being asked. The neighbors who once watched silently now stepped out, their shame almost visible, but the bikers didn't judge them. Instead, they encouraged them to check on Margaret more often. For the first time in days, Margaret smiled, not a small, shaky smile, but a genuine, grateful expression filled with warmth and relief. These men, who society often misjudged, had restored her sense of safety, dignity, and belonging. They didn't do it for praise. They didn't do it for attention. They did it because compassion was part of who they were. As the sun began to set, Bear placed a gentle hand on Margaret's shoulder and told her she wasn't alone anymore. The Iron Guardians would be checking in on her every few days. And they did. They came by with groceries, fixed her fence, sat with her for tea, and even planted flowers in her yard. Margaret became family to them, someone they were proud to protect. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories. Special request, comment below what moment in this story moved you the most.